Hi, everybody. It's Yvonne DeVita and Dr. Larry McDaniel with another episode of Scratchins and Sniffins Out Loud. And before we go too far, I want to wish Larry a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Same to you, Yvonne.
Larry, one of the things I've been thinking about, especially because at Christmas time many people like to give pets, and I've written a couple blog posts about it. But my sister received a pet a few years ago, and lo and behold, she discovered that her dog was pregnant. And I was thinking that maybe we could talk a little bit about that kind of episode. What are the gestation periods, and when should you breed your dog or your cat? And I know they're different, so could you help us understand those issues?
I'm just kind of laughing. What a surprise! You got a dog and a dog family, all in one fell swoop. Well, let's talk about breeding a little bit. Let's talk just a little bit about the reproductive cycle in the female. Most mature dogs, and when I say mature female, by the way, we refer to them as bitches. That's the actual technical term. When a bitch is over 6 months of age, she can become fertile at that point. But most people don't breed young dogs. They like them to be a little bit older, a little bit more mature, which makes a lot of sense. They at least want to have your dog full grown.
Right.
Yeah, and most of them, when they're mature, say a year, year and a half, 2 years of age, they will have usually 2 heat cycles per year.
Oh.
And there are a lot of different breeding strategies. I mean, you can get very technical by going to a veterinarian and monitoring the hormone levels in a bitch, or monitoring vaginal cytology, the cells from the reproductive tract, to predict exactly when the peak of fertility happens. And that's, some breeders do that. Some breeders of very expensive purebred dogs that want to ensure success go to those lengths. But most people will breed 2 or 3 times during the time when the bitch is receptive to the male. And that usually is a period of about 4 to 6 days during the cycle. You will see signs that the female is in heat before she becomes receptive to the male. She'll have a little bit of a discharge. You'll notice that. But later, when she's more receptive, she'll look different. Her external genitalia will be swollen, and she will actually sit still for a male to breed her. And that typically is the time when they are most likely to become pregnant. And a lot of people will breed every other day during that time period.
This is for the dog.
For the female, for the bitch, yeah.
Right.
Breed her every other day when she's receptive to the male. And that can be any time between 4 and 20 days after she first starts to show signs of being in heat. But, the real key is she receptive to the male dog or not? And if she's not receptive to the male dog, it's either too early in the heat cycle or too late in the heat cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and dogs are evolutionary development has kind of ensured reproductive success in that way. So once a female is pregnant, it usually takes between 60 and 64 days for a typical gestation period. So a little over 2 months, right around 2 months. And you can predict pretty closely when puppies will be born.
But you, of course, would not know how many. For the most part, then, the dogs have to go through this maybe repeated breeding cycle, as you said, over a period of days. But my understanding is with cats, it's not like that they ovulate when they're mating.
That's true. We did a post on bears recently where we talked about induced ovulation, and that's what happens with cats. The act of breeding itself causes ovulation. So it's common in solitary animals, animals that through evolutionary time are typically loners, like cats or bears. And the reason for that is, that they don't come across a potential mate every day. think about a mountain lion or think about a black bear. They may run across, a female may run across a male once a month. So if she's in her estrus cycle, the induced ovulation ensures reproductive success. And the house cats have inherited that same evolutionary trait as a wildcat.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good reason, A, to spay your cat if you're not willing to have a house full of kittens, and B, to keep them indoors.
Yeah, I think those are two very good comments, Yvonne. You know, and as far as dogs go, I think there have to be some pretty special circumstances for you to want to breed your dog. You know, you've got a show dog, or you've got some really legitimate reason. To witness the miracle of birth these days is not a real legitimate reason to be breeding a dog. And also, even if you have a good purebred dog, there are a couple of precautions that you should take. If you decide to breed them, you should have some genetic testing done, because a lot of purebred dogs have genetic traits that they pass down through litter and generation upon generation. And most of the big breed organizations are trying to eliminate these genetic disorders within their breeds by genetic testing and screening prior to breeding.
Right.
The other important thing to do is to have them tested for brucellosis, which is an infectious disease that can cause abortion in pregnant animals. So if you have a legitimate reason for breeding, you should do the genetic testing, and you should do brucellosis testing prior to breeding.
So now that we've learned some of the life cycle in the breeding for our dogs and cats, and we've somewhat discussed keeping our pets indoors and in control. I mean, I can share a story back when I was a kid, and we had a beautiful mixed breed shepherd and collie, I think, beautiful dog. And my mother took it into her head that she was going to lock the dog in the garage with I think it was a chow, a big, fluffy, beautiful dog. And I don't think my dog was ready, as you were just saying earlier. And it wasn't a pleasant experience, but she did end up having beautiful, beautiful puppies. But I remembered it, and I would never do such a thing. So maybe I learned something from that. And my mother wasn't mean. She just thought it would be, this was, 30, 40 years ago. So I think this is a good podcast for people to pay attention to. So if anybody out there listening has questions that we didn't answer, please come to the blog and leave us a comment, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Dr. Larry, thank you for your time today, and let's do this again real soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.